It started as a completely ordinary night in the summer of 1992, the kind of night that would normally disappear into memory without leaving any trace behind. Andre Jones was 18 years old, just beginning to step into adulthood, with college ahead of him and a future that still felt open rather than defined. Nothing in his life suggested anything unusual or unstable. He had no criminal history, no known behavioral issues, and no warning signs that would have made anyone look at him differently. From the outside, his life was quiet, predictable, and moving forward in a straight line. That night he was riding in a pickup truck with his girlfriend, Tanisha Love, driving through Mississippi along a stretch of road that felt uneventful and routine. Ahead of them, flashing lights appeared in the distance, a sobriety checkpoint set up by police. It was the kind of stop that usually didn't mean anything beyond a few questions and a brief pause in traffic. Cars were being waved through one by one, and everything about the situation suggested it would be just another routine interaction. But according to police reports, something about Andre's vehicle immediately changed the tone of the encounter. They claimed that, as the truck approached, Andre threw a gun from the vehicle. That single detail transformed the situation instantly from routine to serious. Officers moved in, the checkpoint shifted into enforcement mode, and Andre was ordered out of the vehicle and placed under arrest. What had been a normal stop became something entirely different within seconds. From Tanisha's perspective, the way things unfolded never fully made sense. She later described a noticeable shift in the behavior of officers after Andre gave his name. It wasn't anything overt or dramatic, but there was a moment where conversations became quieter, more private, as officers stepped slightly away from the vehicle. The change in tone was enough for her to notice, even if she couldn't understand it. Then Andre was taken away, and she was left behind trying to process how quickly everything had escalated from a routine checkpoint into something far more serious. From Andre's perspective, the situation inside the system was even more confusing. Hours after his arrest, he called his parents from jail. His voice, according to his family, didn't sound afraid in the way someone expecting punishment might sound. Instead, it sounded disoriented, as if he was still trying to understand the situation he had been placed in. He told them he didn't fully understand what he had been charged with, not in a clear or structured explanation, but in fragments that suggested even he couldn't make sense of the situation. Later, he called again and said he had been moved to another facility, adding another layer of confusion to an already unclear situation. Over the course of the night, there were 5 separate phone calls between Andre and his family. Each one followed a similar pattern. Andre would try to explain what was happening, but the details remained inconsistent. He seemed to be receiving information in pieces, never fully understanding the larger picture. There was no sense of resolution in any of the calls, only a growing accumulation of uncertainty. And then, without explanation, the calls stopped entirely. By morning, that silence turned into something permanent. A police officer arrived at the Jones family home and handed them a slip of paper containing a phone number. There was no immediate explanation offered, no preparation for what was coming. When the family called the number, they were told that Andre was dead. He had been found inside his jail cell during the night. The official explanation was delivered quickly. Authorities stated that Andre had taken his own life inside the cell. According to their report, he used one of his shoelaces, tied it to a metal grate above the shower area, and hanged himself while alone. The case, from the perspective of the state, was considered straightforward and was effectively closed. But for Andre's family, the explanation raised immediate questions. The first concern centered around the physical layout of the cell itself. The metal grate he was said to have used was positioned high above the shower area, at a height that did not seem easily reachable. When his stepfather later visited the cell, he stood beneath it and attempted to understand how such an act could have physically taken place. From his perspective, the explanation did not feel straightforward or natural. It felt difficult to reconcile with what he was seeing. Then there was Andre himself. The person his family knew was not someone who exhibited signs of depression or emotional withdrawal. He was preparing for college, planning for the future, and actively engaged in conversations about what came next. Even during his phone calls from jail, there had been no indication of suicidal intent. He sounded confused rather than hopeless, as though he was trying to understand a situation rather than escape from it. The official investigation maintained its position. A state pathologist reviewed the evidence and concluded that the injuries were consistent with hanging, with no definitive indication of external involvement. From that perspective, the case was medically explained and considered resolved. However, the family sought a second opinion, and another expert reviewing the same evidence reached a different interpretation. This second analysis suggested that certain markings and injury patterns were not entirely consistent with a straightforward hanging, and could potentially indicate the possibility of strangulation or external force. At that point, the case no longer had a single interpretation. Instead, it contained two competing explanations that could not easily be reconciled. One version of events suggests that Andre was alone in his cell, confused and overwhelmed, and ultimately made a decision that ended his life. The other version suggests that something occurred inside that cell that was never fully accounted for, something involving circumstances that were not captured or properly explained. Between these two interpretations, there is no definitive piece of evidence that resolves the contradiction. No video footage, no eyewitness testimony from inside the cell, no complete reconstruction that definitively closes the gap. Years later, the official ruling remains unchanged. Suicide. That is the version recorded in the system and accepted by authorities. But for Andre Jones's family, that conclusion has never fully aligned with what they experienced or observed. Because when they reflect on that night, they do not focus solely on the outcome. They remember the phone calls, the confusion in his voice, and the sense that he was trying to understand something that was steadily slipping beyond his grasp. And ultimately, what remains is not just a question of how he died, but what truly occurred in the time between the last phone call and the moment everything went silent.